Hello and welcome to Property Question Time. I'm Stephen Galpin, and this is the show where we're going to put our property experts to task with your property related questions. And joining me today is Sonia Mann, Head of Field Sales at Roma Finance. Welcome to you, Sonia.
Hello.
And Dave Forde, Chartered Construction Manager and Consultant. Welcome back to you, Dave.
Hello.
Good to see you both. Dave, I'm going to start off with you. Do current property developments have any obligation to be designed to adapt to changing environmental conditions? I'm asking in relation to any building longevity assessment. Now, I suppose that's because we're seeing in the market a lot of developments that I suppose aren't too well insulated, aren't too, economically run. And we've got this thing, in Canary Wharf. I mean, Canary Wharf was developed 20 odd years ago, 25 years ago now, with a lot of low-rise buildings built because there were very few planning restrictions or requirements. And of course, they're being pulled down now. So a lot of these buildings around here, for instance, have got a less than a 20, 25-year life. What is the consideration when you're designing a new building now or a block of flats?
I don't believe there is any actual legislation that says a building has to last for X amount. However, it's generally accepted that a new built home should last for 60 years. Now, if you were 20 years old and you paid whatever it costs, £250,000 to build an house now, you got to the age of 80 and that house fell down, you'd be a bit disappointed, right? So, all our housing stock, Victorian stuff, is 200 years old. It's still standing. But I think probably what your question relates to is a lot of the new modern methods of construction. So modular, SIP panels, etc. Now, a couple of years ago, it was very hard to get a mortgage on those. A lot of those now have been approved by the council mortgage lenders in Britain. So I'm assuming that they're offering a guarantee of an absolute minimum 25 years. And it's a little bit hard to say. If you've only developed your product 5 years ago, you can't give evidence that it's going to last 25, 50 or 60 years, But if the mortgage lenders are happy to give mortgages, it's fair to say that they're going to be pretty robust. And when you talk about the, I think you said something about the heat loss, etc., that there are stipulations now changed to Part L of the building regulations that all new build homes have to prevent an additional 30% heat loss. So there's a lot of regulations now on the heat loss on homes, but I can't think of one specific law that says it must last a certain amount of time.
I suppose this business of longevity is quite difficult because if we do, because of the deposits that are needed, the house prices of today, if we do head towards continental lending where it's quite commonplace to have mortgages that gets passed down through the generations, in other words, a lot longer than 25 years, they're going to need to know that the buildings are good for that, aren't they?
Well, look, my nan and granddad's house was built after the Second World War and it had a design life of 10 years. It was just temporary housing. They were bombed out of the East End. It's built by Italian prisoners of war. I mean, that house has been there 80 years now. It's been underpinned, it's been bricked up outside, it's had a new roof on it, etc. So even if you built a house and there were problems later on with the longevity, there's always ways to keep it standing.
Yes. Ongoing maintenance, it's called, isn't it?
Or whatever, ongoing cost, but...
Yeah. Okay. All right, well, thank you for that, Dave. Sonia, your question. In the past, developers have been encouraged to demonstrate a fairly strong level of pre-sales as a precondition of getting funding. With future uncertainties and a resistance from purchasers to forward commit, are the banks more flexible on this now? I mean, I will just say from my experience, on some of these big blocks here, the banks were wanting 20-25% pre-sales before they'd say yes, okay, go for it. And even then it wasn't that easy. I know that your company in particular specialises in smaller developments and with smaller developers, but is that requirement for some pre-sales still there?
I'd say yes, it is for the banks, the mainstream lenders. Yes, they would, and especially with a larger development like you've just mentioned, I'd say they probably would before they decide to fund. With the smaller projects, yes, no, we haven't seen anything like that with regards to pre-sales. We don't have that as a condition to fund. Exit is a hot topic with most bridging and development lenders anyway, so it is something that we would look at, and the lending during the lending process and the application, the underwriters would actually have that as a focus anyway, to say, right, okay, what is the exit? Is there pre-sales in this? Has the borrower put it on the market, and so somebody can purchase it off plan? So we would look at that, and if somebody does approach us and say, I'm actually going to put these units up for on sale off market, then yeah, that's great off plan, and we would work with that borrower. And that actually adds to that exit strategy that they're thinking. But like I've mentioned before, is the multiple options for the exit. So make sure, again, the client that we're dealing with, and I know you're talking about some of the bigger projects there, but the clients we deal with, we want to make sure that they are looking at their local area. Is there a demand for the kind of project that they've planned? What's the average timescales to sell? So we'd have a look at that, and if a borrower then came to us, presented all that information and said, actually, I've done this and I've looked at where I'm looking to build these apartment blocks or whatever they're looking to do, and there is a demand there, okay, that's great, because that would lower the risk and would make us a bit more comfortable to lend against. Our managing director has spoken many times about the black swan events which we've had. So for instance, like COVID and the war, which has had a great impact on a lot of the developers with getting things done and projects done. So we would always encourage that we need to try and help as much as we possibly can collectively. I mean, we all know there's a lack of homes being built. I think the government are behind massively with that. It's supposed to be 300,000 or something per year, and I think it's currently about 150,000. So we all need to work together to try and get that number back up. Specialist lenders are very prevalent at the moment, and we want to continue to try and help projects like that. And if you find a lender who can actually work on a project like that, they're worth their weight in gold. So you need to sort of work with them.
But I'm thinking, if you're dealing with a smaller developer, then you've also probably got a much greater level of personal contact and personal knowledge about the business workings of that particular developer, and probably his track record.
Yeah.
So I think
it's
see that.
The beauty of working with a first-time developer who is doing their first development project is great, because you work with them, you go through the barriers that they've come across. But actually, we have a lot of repeat borrowers, and a lot of lenders do actually. So they build a relationship with the developer, the project's been successful, they move on to the next and the next and the next. And soon it does become a larger project. And it's great to see that. And then, yes, they do start thinking about pre-sales. And when you start thinking about commercial property, semi-commercial, then yes, you need to start thinking about who's going to let that property downstairs. Is that space pre-sold? That kind of information is important, because that would then really impact the exit strategy. Because when it comes to going to a long-term lender and you've got a retail unit downstairs and it's vacant, then they're going to struggle to get the
doesn't do
longer
anything
term.
for the building at all, does
No.
it? No. Just an interesting point there. You're talking about sort of perhaps residential upstairs and a commercial unit downstairs. As lenders, do you have any difficulty with that? Some lenders are very anti that, aren't they?
No, we're happy with semi-commercial, so that's not a problem. As long as, like I've said before, there's a demand for it. If you walk down the high street, I mean, I live in Leamington Spa, and if you walk down the high street there's a lot of vacant retail space, which is really sad to see. So if somebody was to say, right, I'm going to take this property and I'm going to keep the retail space, okay, great. Who are you going to put in there? And what you find a lot now is there's a great opportunity to purchase a semi-commercial because there's good profit in it, because they're buying it at a good price, and then with permitted development rights, they can quickly get the planning permission to turn upstairs office space into residential, let's say. But then also, I've seen a lot of developers who have been very smart with the retail space. So they've reduced the floor space. So there's still retail space there, but they've reduced it, and they've used the back for another residential apartment flat, which again increases their income stream, doesn't it?
Sure.
So there's ways of looking at it differently, and I think maybe we don't need the huge retail space in certain locations around the UK because it's
just get the balance right.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Okay, well, thank you very much. That's all we've got time for in this half of the show. So join me again after the break when we'll be asking Dave and Sonia more of your questions. Hello, welcome back to part 2 of Property Question Time. I'm Stephen Galpin and I'm joined by Dave Forde and Sonia Mann. Welcome back. Dave, during COVID and in the interests of keeping the building industry going, the regulations on working times were greatly relaxed. Do the experts think that this will now be a permanent feature of building regulations, or could we hopefully see a return to reasonable working times and a total ban on Sunday working?
Well, what you're referring to, I remember that. What you're referring to, I believe, when you talk about the working times, were a lot of sites, when you get planning permission to do work, the council will bring in a thing called a Section 60 notice, and that's to do with noise pollution. So they might say site hours are from 7:30 in the morning till 5 o'clock. So what they did, they expanded them so you wouldn't have a workforce there at the same time. I don't believe, from what I know at the time, it made much difference.
I can tell you it did here. I mean, I now still have to listen to banging and drilling and bumping on Saturdays and Sundays through till 5 or 6 o'clock.
All that happened is jobs kept going as they were. And when you say go back to reasonable working times and a ban on Sunday working, I'm telling you now, when this gets broadcast, there's going to be people screaming, shouting, swearing and throwing things at the telly. You know, what's wrong with working on Sunday? Like, who would even suggest banning people working on Sunday? The only people who'd suggest that are people who've got loads of money and don't need to work, or people who don't work, right? We're sitting in Canary Wharf. This was built by blokes working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Weren't built by blokes working Monday to Friday, 7:30 to 5:30. You know, and all jobs.
But doesn't that environment change as it gets filled up with people and people that are resident here? Do they want to hear building and drilling and diggers going on a Sunday? I don't know. I don't.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, but then you just, for example, when that change came out you were talking about, I was working on Crossrail at Bond Street. Now, right around there, you've got the richest people in the country living. You've got barristers, you've got politicians. You know, they didn't want to hear that, so we had a Section 60 on there. So all we'd do on Saturdays and Sundays, there'd be no drilling outside, there'd be no noisy working outside. So you'd schedule and program all the work to be inside. And when it's always that thing, people don't want to be disturbed by builders, right? Okay, but you want the benefits of the new infrastructure that's going to be built. Yeah, okay, but you don't want to hear us working, right? You know.
I suppose.
So no, I don't think things have changed. No, just that's.
Sonia, what do you think? So what happens if Dave starts building next
I think
to
the question is the builders who are working on Sunday. So do they want to do that? So you've got to think from their point of view of their work-life balance. Is it there? You know, but then you've also then got to think about the other side where a project is being delayed. So there's a delay in the project and there's a funder who's behind it. They need to be paid back. there's a delay. So then do they need to work on a Sunday to get the project done? Because they have slacked on certain things or material hasn't arrived. So that means, okay, we need to now just work on a Sunday as well. I get that. So there's a lot of different factors to really consider. And I think each project then needs to be thought of individually, dependent on what has impacted it to be working on a Sunday, to be doing all them hours. And if it needs to be done for whatever reason, then that's fine. But if it means it's on schedule, everything's going to plan, you've got the materials, you've got the labour, then why not leave Sunday out of it? So that we can just sit out there and have a nice meal.
Dave, until this changed when we had COVID, for decades, it had always been, the sort of unwritten rule, no building or noisy works on a Sunday.
Now listen, mate, right? I started off on the tools. I was a spark. I was a money monster. I wanted to work Sundays. I wanted to work 12 hours a day, 7 days a week on a price, go home, have 2 hours sleep, and go work London Underground at night, come home, have an hour's sleep. It's what I wanted. There's loads of people like that. Don't take our Sundays away, you know what I mean?
Okay.
I'm speaking
shall
up
we
for all
leave
the
Sundays alone?
I agree and disagree with that. So yeah, I'm a bit in the middle. I think, you're right. There are people out there who want to work more. There is a crisis with finance at the moment. People need to earn more. The cost of living is a problem. So they want to work 7 days a week. They want to be successful. They need to earn more money. So why are you taking that away from them if they want to do it? And then there's the people that don't. And if they don't, then you should have that option. But it's a difficult one.
I think, Dave, the other sort of I suppose part of the equation is, for instance, here, you say everybody wants to work these 7 days and make the noise and get on with it. But a lot of the developers here have actually frozen their projects and they're not going to touch them for the next 2 years because they're so frightened of the volatility of costs.
Exactly.
So do we need 7 day working?
Right. So if I'm working over there and I'm doing 5, maybe 6 days a week, and the governor tells me, sorry, mate, you're out of work, we're putting a freeze in it. So I ain't going to go and sit at home with no money. I want to go and find a job that pays 7 days a week. So this is just how it is, Oh,
well, perhaps we're in different times.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Sonia, let's get on with your question, which is, as a freeholder of a fairly large development, i.e. over 250 units, I'm keen to look at improving the green credentials of the building. I know that the service charge can recoup and repay what I spend, but I'm going to have to fund this in the short term. Is this a sum that banks will readily look at and be prepared to fund against perhaps the security of service charge repayment? I appreciate that probably applies to a lot of the bigger developments where they perhaps put a new intercom system in and somebody was, perhaps one of the banks will allow a lease on it, and that'll be secured by the service charge promised to pay it, because service charge has to be paid. It's a legal obligation. But I think it's really the broader question is, how do we fund, and are the banks receptive to funding applications for bringing buildings up to spec, or modern spec? Let's put it that way.
Yeah. I think a green purpose project is seen to be positive. So there's a lot of lenders who would be happy to support that and would support that. You're right about the mainstream banks. I think the mainstream banks would look at the affordability of a project like that and would take service charge into account based on the affordability. So yes, I think they would. I haven't personally come across that kind of a project, but in some circumstances it might land to a specialist lender like us,
right?
Where we will do the short-term lending. And yes, the service charge is an element that the borrower needs to think about on their exit strategy. So yeah, that's fine. With regards to the green element of it, and to get into that spec to what everybody wants now as a modern development, we would just advise the borrower to make sure that their schedule of works, their cost analysis is detailed, is looked at before they approach a broker or a lender, to make sure that it stacks up. So it's great to do green projects, and we all should try and encourage as much as we can. But it needs to stack up, doesn't it?
It's got to work.
It's got to work.
Mm.
And if it works, and it works for the exit as well, then great. I don't see a lender who would not support that. So I think, yeah, it's a difficult question for me as a short-term lender. But yeah, with green projects, they're a positive one, aren't they? Yeah.
Dave, just looking at some of these big buildings here that are now probably 10 or 15 years old now, and probably could do with some upgrading in terms of environmental issues, let's put it that way. What are the sort of things you could do retrospectively in one of these big blocks? Is there anything much you can do?
Yeah, you're talking about the decarbonisation and the heat loss. You could externally clad it, you can internally clad it. They are relatively straightforward, but still costly pieces of work.
I suppose even simple things like changing all the light bulbs from ordinary bulbs to, is it halogen or whatever else?
To LEDs.
LED.
That's something you could do. I mean, I'm assuming buildings, most of these buildings have probably got energy efficient glass where they keep the heat in and the cold out. If not, that's something you could do. But then again, you've got to think of the cost of the scaffolding to do those works.
Yeah. Again, it's this business of thinking things through. I know when the councils were very keen on you having these biomass boilers, there's one or two developments here that's got them and never used them because they suddenly realised that the storage of the biomass material was so flammable, it was dangerous.
Right.
So, you know, a developer spent £1 million, £2 million on having these wretched boilers put in, and then found it was just a waste of money, really. I suppose that's what you've got to be careful of, isn't it?
Yeah.
But there we are. Just move onwards and upwards, as they say. Okay, well, I'm going to say thank you very much to you both. For Dave Forde, Chartered Construction Manager and Consultant. Thank you for coming back, Dave.
Thank you.
Sonia Mann, Head of Field Sales at Roma Finance. Thank you for coming in. Hope you've enjoyed the experience of being on our show.
Thank you.
And I thank you for your answers. They're very helpful and useful. So that's all we've got time for. So join me again next time on Property Question Time. See you then.